Well, moving on to something equally in terms of a potential terminology minefield, we're going to move on to another story that has been floating around the archaeological world, certainly in the UK this month, and that's following last week's Cifa conference in Newcastle. I was lucky enough to be able to go to an evening event at the conference. I don't sadly have the money really to attend the conference itself, but I did manage to get in on a panel in the evening talking about open access archaeology and archaeology online. But earlier that day, there had been a what was being described as a manel, and this is not a mammal. This is a manel, a panel made up of men. And unfortunately, this was the panel in the session discussing professional standards and ethics at the 2017 conference. So these people had been invited to be part of the panel, and it was an all-male event. Now, if possible, I'll put a link to a photo in the video description below so people can see who was there. I don't blame anyone who was there, by the way. The guys on the front, actually one of them in particular was at the session that I was at in the evening, and he felt really conflicted and embarrassed because he was there as an archaeologist. He just happened to be on a line of men, and in that sense he was sort of like, he was wondering if he should apologise for being a beardy man, kind of thing. And this is what makes it quite odd, because really the guys in the room on the panel, they couldn't help it in that sense, but really someone should have identified that if you're talking about best practice, especially in professional standards and ethics, you need to represent at least, was it more than half of the archaeological field, and that's the women for a start.
Yeah,
uh,
I think, and here I'm putting on my metaphorical tin hat in even beginning to discuss this subject as two white men. And I'm accepting.
Let me just get on top of that. We did seriously, we did discuss this. Those of you at home, we did discuss whether or not we should discuss this. And to be honest, we came to the conclusion, along with female archaeology friends, my lovely wife chimed in, essentially saying that not discussing it is just as bad as dismissing it. So in many ways, we are talking about it in a self-aware way. We know that we're men, but at the same time, we didn't want to just bring in a token woman either.
No, putting my cards on the table on this particular issue, I think that obviously I wasn't at Cifa. I didn't see the session. I don't know if the session was recorded. If it has been, I haven't watched the recording. I have only seen the picture, and I have to say it's not a good look. At the same time, I wouldn't want to blame Cifa specifically, or the people who put that panel together. We don't know why it was configured the way it was. They put out a statement subsequently, which I'm sure we'll reference in a minute, and certainly linked to. But I think more than just that single issue, and we can talk in a bit more detail in a minute. I think archaeology in general, certainly in the UK, has a problem with diversity. Period. And here I'm saying, I think if we looked at the stats for open representation in any archaeological fora of not just women but black and minority ethnic, LGBT community, we're actually pretty white middle class and actually probably statistically unrepresentative of the broader population, and that is something I think we can't solve overnight, but we do need to be aware of.
We do, and I think we do. There's two things that come up. One of them, I think we discussed it earlier today, actually, but then another one actually came up in the panel that I was on in the evening, and I'll address the second one first, and that is to say that first of all, there is this interesting thing in terms of the origins of archaeology. The fact that actually archaeology has its roots as a profession, or indeed as an amateur pursuit, in well-to-do, upper middle class, independently wealthy men, therefore white men, going out and practicing archaeology. And I'm not saying that's
and writing up their reports in the Gentleman's Magazine.
Exactly, yes. And I'm not saying that's still the case, but that has an effect. there's a certain there's a self-selecting element there from the earliest days of archaeology. But then moving, I suppose, beyond that, there is this element of actually it needs to be tackled also because this sort of stuff has an effect on the interpretations. It must have an effect on the interpretations that we make about the past. For example, I was talking with someone about the fact that the archaeologists are often guilty of, if not modern gender normism, as it were, being and gender roles being mapped onto the past. Certainly, for example, a binary vision of of gender. So as a mode of reproduction is often the standard one that's put backwards into the past. And so I can't help but wonder actually if you had more more of an LGBT awareness in everyday interpretation, then that might lead to more and exciting interpretations. Now this is where it's even more of a minefield, isn't it? Because you don't want to say to someone, okay, well you're gay, so you need to be a gay archaeologist. It is such a minefield. In that sense, organisations like Cifa can fall into these blunderous pits quite quickly and quite easily, because it may well be that actually they chose people who were very good at their jobs. So what I mean. And so sometimes you're going to have this happen. It's worthwhile just reading their statement, though, just to clarify Cifa's response to this on the Equality and Diversity Group Twitter account. They said the Equality and Diversity Group welcomed the statement by Cifa, rapidly responding to the disappointment and anger over the all-male panel in a session discussing professional standards and ethics at the 2017 conference. This single event, however, should be viewed within the context of structural inequality. There you go. See, we preempted this without. I hadn't actually read all of this before just now. Yay, we're at least on the same page. Barriers to accessibility and the lack of diversity in conferences, and indeed the underlying institutions more generally. Now, actually, that has an impact on, as I say, I couldn't afford to go. So actually wealth is an element here as well, or access to money. As acknowledged in Cifa's statement, considerable research and work has been and continues to be done by other groups to address these underlying problems. We will be working closely with Cifa to ensure the new practices are a genuine benchmark within the industry and that they are put in place in partnership with those who are already producing advice and guidance in these areas. Our aim is that the event at the 2017 conference and the frustration which it has rightly engendered is a catalyst for embedding equality, diversity, accessibility and the planning, organisation and hosting, into the planning, organisation and hosting of all future conferences and events. We see this as a positive opportunity for change and are very keen to invite any individuals or groups who want to work with us to share experiences about conference diversity and accessibility to contact us. And then there's some contact details below. Again, we'll put a link to this particular statement. It's an image file statement below in the video information. So that they did respond very quickly to that.
They did, and I think what that response underlines, and it ties back again to the conversation we were having in the previous part of this podcast about archaeology education. These are not issues that are going to be solved overnight. Even if you imposed a quota system, it wouldn't be solved overnight. And I just think, I think also it varies upon where an awareness of the issues will vary on where perhaps you are in the country. Certainly when it comes to ethnic diversity issues, I'm going to have a different experience working in London to somebody who works on the Welsh borders.
Newcastle, the
exactly, and I think I do, and I know you do too. I work regularly in schools, and I work at the primary school I work with most particularly. Generally speaking, with 7 and 8 year olds on a particular project which we've been running for several years now, and statistically, that school has something like 20 different languages spoken at home.
Hopefully not in one home.
Not in one home, no. But no, it's ethnically extremely diverse. It's one of the most diverse boroughs in London. Statistically, a proportion of those kids will grow up as part of the LGBT community. They may come, they may come from, same-sex parent, that come from a household with same-sex parents, and so on. So that all these issues that are there with those kids, who are, and without exception, are enjoy the heritage history archaeology we do with them, and are enthused and excited and really engaged by the whole subject. It's when they go forward in their school careers, if we're not there to, if our discipline isn't there to nurture all of them regardless of background, and say you all matter, and your different perceptions of this stuff that we all care about matters, then that's why we end up with problems like the Cifa panel.
And in that sense, I suppose at every stage it's about meeting people where they are and who they are. So, for example, an analogy might be Father Christmas. When you're a young kid, you can be presented this idea of Father Christmas, but eventually your understanding of that winter festival matures and evolves as you're ready for it, and we have to be presumably ready to meet people when they move beyond that sort of horrible history as primary school, possibly very pale white version of history, especially in Britain. When they move into a slightly broader intellectual headspace, we need to be able to meet them there and say, well, actually, the medieval period was actually quite diverse. We need to be able to show them the fact that actually, for example, issues linked with sexuality have never been simple in any historical context. No matter what people might have been brought up to think. Maybe there's something to be said there as well, whereby actually we would be encouraging people to engage with archaeology from where they are and from what they believe and from who they are, and therefore maybe much more naturally fall into a state where you don't have slightly normative images like that, whereas essentially it is a case of, unfortunately, it looks like this institution at that moment has a whole load of one type of person at the front.
Yeah, I think so. I think acknowledging there's a problem is part of the solution, and at least that appears to have happened in this case. But I don't think any of us, however much we'd like to, can expect a solution overnight. On the other hand, if it happens again next year, we've got a problem.
Yeah. That said. That said, though, it would be obviously you don't want to see positive discrimination for the sake of it. Again, it's one of those things where it's such a difficult minefield to walk. The panel has to be representative of the expertise of the people on the panel as well, not just who they personally are and what.
I think the point, but I think the point is there aren't just was it 7 on the panel? There aren't just 7 people in the country who are qualified to talk to that subject.
No, exactly. Okay, well, again, we're doing well. We're snaking through these controversial topics this month, and I think we just
wait for the comments. That's
No, I think we've been okay. We've been fair, but of course we do welcome comments and emails. There's an email address above. People can email us. Incidentally, as well, email us with news stories if there's something you want us to cover next month. Just send it over.